I'm Lou, 31 years old, and tonight's family dinner is going exactly as expected. My sister Hannah beams across the table while my mother gushes over her latest accomplishment. I push food around my plate, waiting for the inevitable comparison. Right on cue, Mom's voice cuts through the conversation. Hannah's the one we're proud of. Always has been. The familiar sting settles in my chest as I quietly finish eating. Some things never change in this family. If you've ever felt invisible in your own home, drop a comment below about where you're watching from, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear how one silent goodbye changed everything. Growing up in suburban Boston shaped much of who I am today. Our two-story colonial in Newton was comfortable enough, nestled among similar homes with manicured lawns and basketball hoops in driveways. My father Richard worked as an electrical engineer at a tech firm in Cambridge, putting in long hours designing circuits that powered devices I rarely understood. My mother Diane taught English at the local high school, carrying stacks of essays home every weekend, red pen always at the ready. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family. Two parents with stable careers, two kids, a golden retriever named Rusty, and summer vacations to Cape Cod. But inside our home, an unspoken hierarchy existed from my earliest memories. Hannah arrived when I was 3 years old. I have vague recollections of peering into her crib, wondering what all the fuss was about. Even then, this tiny, squirming bundle commanded attention in ways I never could. As we grew, the pattern only solidified. My academic career was respectable but unremarkable. I maintained a B+ average throughout school, occasionally dipping into A- territory when a subject particularly interested me. I played second base on the baseball team, but never made captain. I had friends but wasn't especially popular. In essence, I was thoroughly average. Hannah, however, was exceptional from the start. Her kindergarten teacher called her a natural leader. By third grade, she was performing violin solos at school concerts while parents whispered about her talent. In middle school, straight A's came effortlessly. By high school, she was class president, first chair violinist, and valedictorian. "Your sister got another perfect score," my mother would announce at dinner, her voice tinged with reverence. When I brought home a B+ on a difficult physics exam, she merely nodded and asked if I'd studied enough. My father was less obvious, but no less complicit. He attended all of Hannah's recitals, sitting front row, camera in hand. For my baseball games, he arrived late and left early, claiming work emergencies that never seemed to materialize during Hannah's events. Their favoritism manifested in countless small moments. Hannah's room was painted and redecorated 3 times throughout her childhood. Mine kept the same blue walls and sports pennants from age 8 until I left for college. For her 16th birthday, Hannah received driving lessons and partial funding for a used car. On my 16th, I got a watch and permission to use the family's second vehicle occasionally. I tried everything to earn their approval. When academic excellence didn't work, I doubled down on extracurriculars. When sports achievements failed to impress, I tried student government. Nothing elevated me to Hannah's status in their eyes. By the time I left for Boston University, I had developed effective coping mechanisms. Lower expectations meant fewer disappointments. Emotional detachment protected me from the sting of their indifference. I chose marketing as my major, drawn to its blend of creativity and strategy, and found I had a genuine talent for understanding what motivated people. Perhaps because I'd spent my life studying my parents, trying to decode what would finally make them proud. Hannah predictably attended Harvard Law School, after graduating summa cum laude from Yale. While I moved into a modest apartment in Somerville with 2 roommates, she secured a beautiful Cambridge condo paid for, mostly by our parents, as a graduation gift. When I landed my first job at a small marketing agency with a starting salary of $45,000, they nodded appreciatively. When Hannah got her first position at a prestigious Boston law firm earning triple that amount, they threw her a party. Over the years, the pattern continued. I climbed the career ladder steadily, if unspectacularly, eventually landing at Jackson and Pierce Marketing, where I now serve as a senior account manager. The work is challenging and mostly satisfying. My clients appreciate my insights, and my colleagues respect me. But in my parents' eyes, my achievements pale beside Hannah's meteoric rise to junior partner at Caldwell & Schmidt in New York, where she specializes in corporate law. 3 years ago, I met Melissa at a friend's wedding. She works as a pediatric nurse with warm brown eyes and a laugh that makes everyone around her smile. From our first date, she saw me, truly saw me, in ways my family never had. She noticed how I tensed before family gatherings, how I deflected compliments, how I diminished my own successes. "Why do you let them make you feel so small?" she asked after witnessing a particularly painful family dinner last Thanksgiving. "It's easier than fighting it," I replied. The answer rehearsed from years of similar conversations with friends. "Easier isn't always better," she countered, her hand firm in mine. "You deserve more, Lou." With Melissa's encouragement, I've tried setting boundaries with my family. I've reduced our monthly dinners to once every 6 to 8 weeks. I've practiced talking about my accomplishments without self-deprecation. I've even attempted gentle confrontations when the comparisons become too blatant. Nothing has changed. My parents continue to view me through the lens of what I'm not. Not as successful as Hannah, not as accomplished, not as perfect. And I continue to show up, hoping for different results, while preparing for the inevitable disappointment. The invitation came as it always did. A text from my mother 3 weeks in advance. "Family dinner on the 12th. Hannah and Greg will be in town. 6 o'clock. Let us know if Melissa can make it." I stared at my phone, thumb hovering over the keyboard. I could make an excuse: a work emergency, a sudden illness, a prior commitment mysteriously forgotten until this moment. But avoidance had never solved anything. "We'll be there," I typed, then deleted it. "I'll be there," I corrected. "Melissa has a night shift at the hospital." My mother's reply came immediately. "That's too bad. Looking forward to seeing you." The lack of an exclamation point spoke volumes. As the day approached, my anxiety built in familiar ways. A tightness in my chest when I thought about the dinner. Trouble sleeping the night before. Imaginary conversations playing in my head, where I finally said all the things I'd been holding back for decades. Melissa noticed my distraction that morning as we ate breakfast in our apartment. Sunlight streamed through our kitchen window, illuminating her concerned expression. "I could try to switch shifts," she offered, spreading peanut butter on her toast. "Jenna owes me a favor." I shook my head. "You shouldn't have to use your favors as a buffer for my family issues." "That's what relationships are for," she countered. "Sharing the hard stuff." "You've shared plenty already," I said, trying to smile. "Besides, I'm a big boy. I can handle one dinner." She squeezed my hand across our small kitchen table. "Call me after, no matter how late." The familiar drive to Newton that evening felt like traveling back in time. Each mile erased a year of independence, of self-worth I'd built away from their influence. By the time I pulled into the driveway of my childhood home, I felt 16 again, uncertain, inadequate, invisible. The house looked exactly as it always had. 2 stories of traditional colonial architecture, dark green shutters against white siding. My mother's carefully tended flower beds lined the walkway to the front door. Through the bay window I could see movement. My father probably mixing drinks, my mother arranging something in the dining room. I sat in my car for an extra minute, gathering myself. On the passenger seat lay a bottle of wine I'd brought. A nice Cabernet, not extravagant, but thoughtful. Melissa had tied a small ribbon around it. A touch, she insisted, made any gift more personal. I took a deep breath, grabbed the wine, and approached the front door. My mother answered before I could knock, her perfect posture and carefully styled silver blonde hair unchanged by time. She wore tailored black pants and a blue cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. "Lou, you're right on time," she said, accepting my half hug with a pat on my back. No warmth, just acknowledgement. "Hi, Mom," I replied, handing her the wine. "How are you?" "Busy as always. Book club volunteer work the usual." She glanced at the bottle. "Thank you for this. Your father just opened a beautiful Merlot, but we can save this for another time." Translation: my selection wasn't quite good enough for tonight. My father emerged from the kitchen, highball glass in hand. At 68, Richard Sullivan remained fit from his weekend golf games, his white hair still thick, his handshake firm. "Good to see you, son," he said, clapping my shoulder. "Drink." "Bourbon neat," I replied, removing my jacket. "Still on that kick, huh?" He turned back toward the kitchen. I remember when you went through that craft beer phase in college. And then it was scotch for a while. Another subtle dig. Even my drinking preferences were inconsistent, unreliable. Unlike Hannah, whose taste for fine wine had been praised as sophisticated since her early 20s. I followed him to the living room, where everything remained museum perfect. The family photos on the mantel told our story in carefully curated images. Hannah's graduation from Harvard Law centered prominently, my college graduation tucked to the side. Hannah's wedding portrait took pride of place on the piano, while the professional photo Melissa and I had taken last Christmas was nowhere to be seen. The doorbell rang, and my mother's entire demeanor transformed. She practically flew to the entrance, her voice rising an octave. "Hannah, Greg, come in. Come in." My sister entered in a whirlwind of expensive perfume and genuine warmth. Unlike our parents, Hannah had never intentionally made me feel less than. She simply existed in her natural state of excellence while accepting the preferential treatment as her due. At 28, Hannah remained striking, tall and slender like our mother with the same high cheekbones and clear blue eyes. Her dark hair fell in perfect waves to her shoulders, and her smile lit the room. Beside her, Greg looked every inch the successful architect in his tailored blazer and designer glasses. They were the perfect power couple, complementing each other visually and professionally. "Lou," Hannah exclaimed, embracing me with real affection. "I've missed you. How's Melissa?" "She's good," I replied, returning her hug. "Working tonight, unfortunately." "That's too bad. Tell her we're overdue for a double date. Maybe before we head back to New York." Greg shook my hand firmly. "Good to see you, man. How's the marketing world treating you?" "Can't complain," I answered automatically. "Landed a new account last month that's keeping me busy." "That's great," Greg said, and I could tell he meant it. My mother reappeared with fresh drinks for the newcomers. "Hannah, tell everyone your news while we finish getting dinner ready." Hannah's smile widened. I wasn't going to say anything yet, but since Mom brought it up, I made junior partner last week. The living room erupted in congratulations. My father raised his glass in a toast. My mother clasped her hands together in delight. Greg put his arm around Hannah's waist, looking genuinely proud. "That's 3 years ahead of schedule," my mother informed me as though I might not grasp the significance. "The youngest junior partner in the firm's history." "That's fantastic, Hannah," I said sincerely. "My sister worked incredibly hard, and she deserved her success." "What about your news, Lou?" Hannah asked, turning attention my way. "You mentioned a new account." "Yeah, we landed the Riverstone Hotels chain," I explained, warming to the topic. "It's a regional boutique hotel group looking to expand nationally. We're handling their complete rebranding and digital strategy. I'm leading the team." "That sounds wonderful," Hannah said. My mother glanced at her watch. "We should move to the table. The roast will be perfect right now." And just like that, my professional achievement evaporated from the conversation, deemed insufficient for further exploration. As we took our seats around the formal dining table, crystal glasses catching the light from the chandelier's silver polish to a mirror shine, I felt the familiar knot forming in my stomach. My father carved the roast beef with practiced precision, while my mother arranged serving dishes within easy reach. "Greg, I hear your firm is designing that new cultural center downtown." My father began passing plates around the table. The conversation flowed around me as it always did. I contributed occasionally, mostly responded to direct questions, and watched as my parents lavished attention on Hannah and Greg. The tension in my shoulders built with each passing minute, the weight of decades of similar dinners pressing down on me. I thought of Melissa probably starting her shift at the hospital, now moving efficiently between tiny patients, her gentle hands bringing comfort. In her eyes, I was enough. I was more than enough. Why couldn't I feel that same certainty here in the house where I grew up? Dinner progressed predictably through the main course. My mother's perfectly prepared roast beef, garlic mashed potatoes, and asparagus with hollandaise sauce. The menu unchanged from countless family gatherings. The conversation circled familiar territories Hannah's cases described in impressive but vague legal terms. Greg's architectural projects complete with photos on his phone that my parents examined with exaggerated interest, my father's golf game, and my mother's community board activities. I attempted to participate, mentioning a creative campaign strategy we'd developed for the hotel chain that had received industry recognition. We're using a nostalgia-driven approach that connects local history with modern travel experiences. I explained, feeling a rare moment of professional pride. Initial focus groups show really strong emotional engagement. My father nodded absently, cutting another piece of roast beef. Sounds interesting. Speaking of creative, my mother interjected before I could elaborate. Hannah, did you bring those photos from your Aspen trip, the ones you mentioned? And, just like that, my contribution vanished into the ether, replaced by my sister's winter vacation snapshots. I caught Hannah glancing at me apologetically as she pulled out her phone. But she couldn't refuse our mother's request without creating awkwardness. The snow was incredible, Hannah narrated as my parents passed her phone between them. We lucked out with perfect conditions every day. I focused on my plate, moving food around more than eating it. This was the familiar rhythm of our family. Hannah at center stage, myself in the wings, barely visible. I'd come to expect it, even accept it, but Melissa's words from that morning echoed in my head. You deserve more, Lou. After the main course, my mother disappeared into the kitchen and returned with her signature dessert and triple chocolate cake that had been my favorite as a child. I noticed with a pang that she still remembered this small detail about me, even while missing so much else. Before we cut the cake, my mother announced, returning to her seat, we wanted to discuss something exciting. She looked pointedly at Hannah. Should we tell them? Hannah smiled, though. Something in her expression seemed hesitant. Mom and Dad have decided to help us with a down payment on a brownstone in Brooklyn Heights, she explained. We found the perfect place, but New York real estate being what it is. It's an investment in your future, my father added firmly. The market there is only going up. I calculated quickly in my head. A down payment on a Brooklyn Heights brownstone would easily run into the hundreds of thousands. When Melissa and I had mentioned possibly buying a condo last year, my parents had offered congratulations, but no financial assistance. That's generous, I said, keeping my voice even. Congratulations. My mother beamed at Hannah. Well, with the junior partnership and Greg's promotion, it's perfect timing for you to put down roots in a good neighborhood, especially since you'll be starting a family soon. Hannah nearly choked on her wine. Mom, we've talked about this. We're not ready for kids yet. My career is just taking off. You don't want to wait too long, my mother warned. Advanced maternal age brings all sorts of risks. Diane. My father cautioned, sensing dangerous territory. I'm just saying, my mother continued, undeterred. 30 is approaching quickly. Hannah shot me a look of shared exasperation. This was familiar territory too. Our mother's traditional expectations colliding with modern realities. Actually, I said, seizing the opening, Melissa, and I have been talking about getting engaged. The table fell silent. My mother's fork paused halfway to her mouth. Engaged, she repeated. That's sudden. We've been together 3 years, Mom. Well, yes, but. She trailed off, searching for words. Is her career stable enough? Being a nurse is demanding, especially with children. We're not planning children immediately, I said, feeling a flush of irritation. And her career is very stable. She just made charge nurse on the pediatric floor. That's wonderful for Melissa, my mother replied, her tone, making it clear she didn't find it particularly impressive. She turned back to Hannah. Well, at least Hannah's career is established before starting a family. Junior partner provides so much more flexibility. I felt rather than saw my father's discomfort. He shifted in his chair, suddenly very interested in rearranging his silverware. He knew what was happening, but, as always, chose not to intervene. Hannah, to her credit, tried redirecting. Lou's doing really well too, Mom. Marketing director by 31 is impressive, and that hotel account sounds fascinating. My mother nodded distractedly. Yes, of course. More cake, anyone? As she served dessert, the conversation limped along. I felt the familiar tightness in my chest, the sense of invisibility that had haunted me since childhood. I mechanically ate chocolate cake that I couldn't taste, nodding at appropriate intervals while my mind drifted. Then it happened. Hannah was describing a complex case she'd helped win my father, asking interested questions about legal strategy, when my mother reached over and squeezed Hannah's hand. Hannah's the one we're proud of, she said, her voice warm with affection. Always has been. The words hung in the air like smoke. My fork froze halfway to my mouth. Hannah's eyes widened in shock. My father stared at his plate. The silence stretched, became tangible. I felt my face burning, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. 20 years of therapy condensed into 5 devastating words. Always has been. Not just now, not just today, but always. A lifetime of feeling second best, confirmed in a single sentence. The rational part of my brain cataloged my options. I could explode in long-suppressed anger. I could make a scene, flip the table storm out dramatically. I could deliver the speech I'd rehearsed countless times in my head, listing every instance of favoritism I'd endured. I could finally make them see what they'd done. But something different happened instead. A strange calm settled over me, like I was watching the scene from a distance. The constant need for their approval, the hunger for recognition that had driven me for decades. It suddenly felt exhausting rather than essential. I looked at my mother's face. She didn't even seem to realize what she'd said, how clearly she'd articulated the family dynamic we all pretended didn't exist. There was no malice there, just the unfiltered truth she'd always believed. I picked up my fork and continued eating my cake. The awkward silence following my mother's declaration stretched into what felt like hours, though realistically, it lasted maybe 30 seconds. Hannah cleared her throat, looking mortified. "Mom, that's a terrible thing to say," she admonished quietly. My mother blinked, seeming genuinely confused. "What, I'm just expressing how proud we are of your accomplishments." At Lou's expense, Hannah pressed, nodding toward me. My mother's eyes finally met mine, still not comprehending the impact of her words. "Lou knows we're proud of him too," she said dismissively. "Don't be so sensitive." My father shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "Diane," he murmured, a weak attempt at intervention. I continued eating my cake methodically, cutting perfect bites with the side of my fork. The chocolate tasted like ashes, but I maintained a neutral expression. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. Not a breaking, but a quiet, powerful realignment. "The cake is delicious, Mom," I said evenly. "You've always made the best chocolate cake." My calm response clearly unsettled everyone more than anger would have. Hannah watched me with concern. My father studied his wineglass. My mother, after a moment of confusion, seized the compliment like a lifeline. "Thank you, dear. I used Dutch cocoa this time. Makes all the difference." The conversation limped forward, artificially buoyant, as everyone except me worked to move past the uncomfortable moment. I participated, minimally answering direct questions with brief responses, offering small smiles that didn't reach my eyes. When dessert concluded, my mother stood to clear the plates. "We'll have coffee in the living room," she announced, her voice overly bright. "I'll help with the dishes," I offered, standing to gather plates. "You don't need to do that," she protested automatically. "I want to," I replied, already stacking dessert plates. Hannah started to rise. "I can help too." "No," I said, my voice gentle but firm. "You're the guest of honor. Go relax." I carried dishes into the kitchen, aware of the concerned glances following me. In the kitchen, I rolled up my sleeves and ran hot water into the sink. My mother's finest china couldn't go in the dishwasher, a fact I remembered from countless family dinners. My father appeared beside me a few minutes later, dish towel in hand. We worked in silence for a while, me washing, him drying. The familiar routine felt strangely comforting despite everything. "Your mother doesn't always think before she speaks," he finally said, voice low, to prevent it carrying to the living room. I rinsed a wineglass carefully. "Doesn't she?" He sighed. "Lou." "It's fine, Dad," I said, passing him the glass. "Really?" "It's not fine," he admitted, surprising me. What she said was wrong. I looked at him directly for the first time that evening. "Then why didn't you say something? Why have you never said anything?" He focused intently on drying the wineglass, avoiding my eyes. "Your mother is. She has certain ideas about things. About success. About what matters." He set the glass down carefully. "It's not that she doesn't love you." "Love isn't the issue," I replied, washing another plate. "It never has been." "What do you mean?" "You can love someone and still make them feel worthless." The words hung between us, honest in a way we'd never been. My father's shoulders slumped slightly. I should have done better, he conceded. I nodded, acknowledging the admission without absolving him. We finished the dishes in silence, the weight of unspoken words filling the kitchen. When we returned to the living room, Hannah and Greg were looking at real estate listings on their phones, while my mother arranged coffee cups on the side table. Normal family activities in a house, suddenly foreign to me. I think I'm going to head out, I announced, checking my watch. My mother looked up in surprise. Already? We haven't had coffee. I know, I'm sorry. I have an early client meeting tomorrow I need to prepare for. The lie came easily, and no one questioned it. Presentations for valued clients were respected reasons for departure. Personal hurt was not. Well, if you must, my mother said, disappointment evident. Hannah, will you be in town through the weekend? And just like that, the focus shifted back to my sister, my impending departure already forgotten. I gathered my jacket and keys, while polite goodbyes were exchanged. Hannah followed me to the front door, concern evident in her expression. Lou, wait, she said, stepping onto the porch with me. Are you okay? The night air was cool against my face, the street quiet, except for distant traffic. I considered deflecting, as I always had, assuring her everything was fine, maintaining the family peace. Instead, I chose honesty. No, Hannah. I'm not okay. I haven't been okay for a very long time. She leaned against the porch railing, crossing her arms against the chill. What Mom said was horrible. I'm so sorry. The horrible part isn't that she said it, I replied. It's that she's always felt it, and that Dad has too, even if he'd never say it out loud. Hannah's eyes widened. Lou, that's not true. They love you. Love isn't the same as respect or admiration. I sighed, suddenly exhausted. They've made their feelings clear my entire life. Tonight was just the first time she said the quiet part out loud. I never realized it was this bad, Hannah said softly. I knew they made comparisons sometimes, but I thought it was just, I don't know, typical parent stuff. It's not your fault, I assured her. You didn't ask for their favoritism. But I accepted it, she admitted. I never called them out. I just enjoyed being the golden child. Anyone would, I said, meaning it. Look, I don't blame you, Hannah. We were both put in impossible positions. You couldn't win by achieving less, and I couldn't win by achieving more. She reached for my arm. What can I do? How can I help fix this? For the first time that evening, I smiled genuinely. You can't fix decades of dynamics in one night. But thanks for asking. I pulled my car keys from my pocket. I just need some space right now. She nodded reluctantly. Call me tomorrow, please. I will. I promise, stepping toward my car. Congratulations again on the partnership. You earned it. Driving home, I felt oddly light, as if I'd set down a heavy burden I'd been carrying for years. Not completely. Such weights don't disappear instantly. But enough to notice the difference. I hadn't yelled or created a scene. I hadn't delivered a dramatic monologue about my feelings. I'd simply acknowledged the truth to myself and stopped pretending. When I arrived home, our apartment was dark, except for the small lamp we always left on in the entryway. I texted Melissa to let her know I was back, knowing she'd check her phone during breaks. Dinner over. Home safe. We'll tell you all tomorrow. Love you. Her reply came quickly. Early shift ended. Picking up ice cream on way home. There in 20. Love you more. I smiled, feeling the contrast between the cold formality of my parents' house and the warm comfort of the home Melissa and I had built together. Here I was seen. Here I was valued. By the time Melissa arrived with mint chocolate chip ice cream and tired eyes, I'd changed into comfortable clothes and opened a bottle of wine. I told her everything. My mother's words. My quiet response. The conversation with Hannah. I'm proud of you, she said, when I finished squeezing my hand across our small kitchen table. That took real strength. It didn't feel like strength, I admitted. It felt like giving up. Not giving up, she corrected, letting go. There's a difference. As we went to bed that night, I realized she was right. I hadn't surrendered in defeat. I'd released something that had never served me, the desperate need for approval from people incapable of giving it freely. I fell asleep with Melissa's head on my shoulder, wondering what would happen next, but no longer afraid of the answer. Morning sunlight filtered through our bedroom curtains when I awoke. For a moment, I existed in the peaceful limbo between sleep and full consciousness before memories of the previous night came flooding back. My mother's words, my quiet departure, the strange sense of liberation that followed. I reached for my phone to check the time and found a screen full of notifications. 3 missed calls from Hannah, 2 from my father, a text from my mother asking if I'd arrived home safely, and most surprisingly, a long text from Hannah sent at 6:45 that morning. "Lou, I need to talk to you. Mom's in tears and won't talk to anyone. What did you do? Call me when you wake up. This is serious." I stared at the message, bewildered. I hadn't done anything beyond leaving early. No confrontation, no angry words, no dramatic pronouncements. Just a quiet goodbye and an honest conversation with Hannah on the porch. How could that have provoked such a reaction? Beside me, Melissa stirred. "Everything okay?" she murmured, sensing my tension. I showed her Hannah's text. She read it and frowned. "That's weird. You didn't say anything to your mom before leaving, right?" "Nothing beyond normal goodbyes," I confirmed. I was perfectly polite. Melissa sat up, fully awake now. Maybe that's what got to her. No drama for her to dismiss, as you being oversensitive. I considered this possibility as I swung my legs over the side of the bed. Maybe I should call Hannah. What about work? The Riverstone account presentation wasn't until Thursday. My team could handle today's preparation meeting without me. I think I'll take a personal day, I decided. This feels important. After Melissa left for her shift, I made coffee and dialed Hannah's number. She answered immediately. "Lou, finally. What happened last night?" "Nothing happened," I replied, genuinely confused. I said goodbye and went home. "Why?" Hannah's sigh traveled through the phone. "After you left, things got intense. I confronted Mom and Dad about how they treat you. I nearly dropped my coffee mug." "You what?" "I couldn't stop thinking about what you said on the porch," she explained. "About how this wasn't just one comment, but a lifetime of feeling less valued. And I realized you were right. I'd watched it happen for years, and never said anything." I sank onto our sofa, processing her words. "What did they say?" "Dad admitted it," Hannah said. "He actually said, 'We've probably been harder on Lou than was fair.' But Mom got defensive. She insisted she loves both her children equally and that I was misinterpreting things." "That sounds about right," I commented, unsurprised by either reaction. "But then I did something." Hannah hesitated. "I showed Mom some of your texts from over the years. The ones where you mentioned feeling overlooked or compared unfavorably to me." I froze. Hannah and I had always been close despite our parents' comparative treatment. We'd texted regularly since college, often confiding frustrations and insecurities. I'd occasionally mentioned feeling lesser in our parents' eyes, though I'd always been careful not to blame Hannah directly. "You saved those texts?" I asked, unsure whether to feel touched or betrayed. "Not intentionally at first," she admitted. "But a few years ago, I started noticing patterns in how you talked about family gatherings, how you'd mention feeling invisible or inadequate afterward. I saved some of them because, I don't know, I guess part of me knew something wasn't right." I closed my eyes, imagining the scene, Hannah showing our mother concrete evidence of my hurt feelings. Feelings I'd rarely expressed directly to her. "What happened then?" "Mom got really quiet," Hannah continued. "Then she got angry, said I was attacking her and taking your side. Dad tried to calm her down, but she kept saying she'd been a good mother, that she'd always supported both of us." Classic deflection. I noted, recognizing the pattern from countless past confrontations. "Right. But then Greg, you won't believe this." Greg actually spoke up. He told Mom that even he'd noticed the favoritism, and he'd only been around for 5 years. I could picture my brother-in-law's calm, measured tone delivering this observation. As an outsider to the family dynamic, his perspective would carry weight my sisters couldn't. "That's when Mom started crying," Hannah continued. "Not just a few tears, full sobbing. She locked herself in the bedroom and wouldn't come out. Dad kept knocking, trying to talk to her, but she wouldn't respond. This morning she still won't speak to anyone. She's just sitting in the garden, ignoring Dad completely." I felt a confusing mix of emotions. Vindication that others had finally acknowledged what I'd experienced, guilt over my mother's distress, and a strange sense of power I'd never felt in relation to my family. "I didn't mean to cause this," I said truthfully. "You didn't," Hannah insisted. "Your quiet dignity last night made me see things clearly for the first time. This isn't your fault. It's a reckoning that's been coming for years." We talked for another half hour, Hannah filling in more details of the confrontation, me processing what it all meant. We agreed to give our mother some space before any further conversations. After hanging up, I paced our apartment, restless with conflicting impulses. Part of me wanted to call my mother immediately to comfort her, despite everything. Another part wanted to maintain distance to protect the fragile boundary I'd finally established. I texted Melissa about the situation. Her response was supportive but firm. "This is a necessary crisis. Don't rush to fix it for them. Take care of yourself first." Over the next 2 days, I immersed myself in work, using the Riverstone presentation as a welcome distraction. Hannah provided brief updates. Our mother had finally started speaking again, but remained withdrawn. Our father was walking on eggshells, unsure how to navigate this unfamiliar family terrain. Greg had returned to New York for a work commitment, leaving Hannah to manage the aftermath alone. On the third morning after the dinner, my father called while I was reviewing presentation slides at my desk. "Lou," he said when I answered his voice, tired and strained. "We need to talk. All of us." "I'm not sure that's a good idea right now," I replied cautiously. "Things are still raw." "Please," he said, the words so unexpected from my typically stoic father that it stopped me cold. "Your mother. She's not doing well. She needs to speak with you." I closed my eyes, weighing Melissa's advice against the pull of familial obligation. "What does she want to say?" "I don't know exactly," he admitted, "but she's been going through old photo albums looking at pictures of you growing up. She cried when she found your third-grade science fair ribbon. I've never seen her like this." The image was so at odds with my mother's usual composed demeanor that I struggled to picture it. "Let me talk to Melissa," I said finally. "I'll call you back." Melissa and I discussed it over lunch at a cafe near my office. She listened thoughtfully, her nurse's training evident in her focused attention. "What do you want to do?" she asked after I'd explained my father's call. "Part of me wants to avoid the whole thing," I admitted, "but another part thinks this might be the only chance for real change." She nodded understanding. "Just remember, you don't owe them immediate forgiveness. You can listen without absolving." Her wisdom, as always, centered me. "Will you come with me?" "Of course," she said, squeezing my hand. "But I think the first conversation should be just family. I'll drive you there and wait if you need me." That evening, I called my father back. "I'll come tomorrow after work," I said, setting clear boundaries. "But I'm not staying long and I'm not promising anything." "That's fair," he replied, relief evident in his voice. "Thank you, son." I spent that night with Melissa, rehearsing what I might say, preparing for different scenarios. "Just speak your truth calmly," she advised. "You've spent a lifetime managing their emotions. Let them manage yours for once." The next day passed in a blur of meetings and emails, my mind only half present. By 5:30, Melissa and I were in the car, heading toward Newton. She drove, while I stared out the window, watching familiar landmarks pass by. The high school, where my mother had taught the park, where I'd played baseball, the corner store, where I'd bought candy with my allowance. "I'll wait at the coffee shop 2 blocks away," Melissa said, as we neared my parents' neighborhood. "Text me if you need anything, even just moral support." "I will," I promised, leaning over to kiss her cheek at a stoplight. "Thank you for being here." "Always," she replied simply. When we pulled up to the house, my stomach clenched with familiar anxiety. But beneath it was something new, a solid core of self-worth that Melissa had helped me discover and that recent events had strengthened. "I love you," she said as I got out of the car. "Remember that." I nodded, squared my shoulders, and walked up the path to my childhood home, ready at last to speak my truth. My father opened the door before I could knock. The changes in him since dinner were striking. New lines around his eyes, shoulders slightly stooped, his usual crisp appearance replaced by a rumpled sweater and khakis that looked slept in. "Lou," he said, relief evident in his voice. I nodded, stepping inside without offering a hug or handshake. The familiar entryway felt different somehow. Smaller, less intimidating than it had just days ago. "Where's Mom?" I asked, removing my jacket. "In the living room." He lowered his voice. "She's been there most of the day, hardly eating." I followed him through the dining room, noticing small details I'd overlooked during countless family gatherings. A photograph of me in Little League I'd forgotten. Existed a ceramic mug I'd made in art class displayed on a side shelf. Had these always been here? These small acknowledgments of my existence? Or had they been hastily added in preparation for this conversation? My mother sat in her usual armchair, but everything else about her appearance was unfamiliar. Her perfect posture had collapsed into something fragile and uncertain. Her immaculate hair hung limp around her face. She wore no makeup, revealing the true age of her 67 years. When she looked up and saw me, her eyes, red-rimmed and swollen, filled immediately with tears. "Lou," she whispered, half rising, before sinking back into her seat. I took the sofa across from her, maintaining physical and emotional distance. My father hovered uncertainly before settling beside my mother, his hand reaching for hers. The silence stretched between us, heavy with decades of unspoken truths. For once, I didn't rush to fill it with pleasantries or deflections. This was their reckoning to begin, not mine. "Thank you for coming," my mother finally said, her voice hoarse. I needed to see you." I nodded, waiting. "I don't know where to start," she admitted, twisting her wedding ring nervously. "Hannah showed me your text messages about how you felt all these years." And I prompted when she paused. "And I was shocked," she said. "Truly shocked. I had no idea you felt so. Overlooked." The absurdity of her statement nearly made me laugh. "Really, Mom? You had no idea?" After explicitly stating at dinner that Hannah's the one you're proud of, always have been. She flinched as her own words were repeated back to her. "I didn't mean it the way it sounded." "I think you did," I replied evenly. "I think it was one of the most honest things you've ever said to me." My father shifted uncomfortably. "Lou, your mother's been devastated since that night." "I'm not here to manage her feelings," I said, surprising myself with my firmness. "I've spent my entire life doing that. Downplaying my own hurt to avoid causing waves, accepting less than I deserve to maintain family peace." My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "We never meant to hurt you." "Intent doesn't change impact," I countered. "Let me tell you what it felt like growing up in this house. Let me tell you what it felt like being your son." And for the first time in my life, I did just that. I spoke without filtering, without softening, without consideration for their comfort. I told them about the baseball trophy ceremony, where they left early to attend Hannah's violin recital. About the high school graduation party where my mother spent the evening telling her friends about Hannah's college scholarship rather than my achievements. About the crushing weight of never being quite good enough, no matter what I accomplished. "Do you remember my 25th birthday?" I asked. "You forgot completely. When I called that evening, you were embarrassed and promised to make it up to me. 2 weeks later, you threw Hannah a surprise party for her promotion and never mentioned my birthday at all." My mother's face crumpled. "I didn't realize. We didn't think." "That's the problem," I said. "You never thought about how your actions affected me. You never considered that I might need the same support and encouragement you gave Hannah automatically." My father leaned forward. "Lou, we've always loved you. Always been proud of you." "You've never shown it," I replied simply. "Not in ways that mattered." "But we paid for your college," my mother protested weakly. "We helped with your first apartment deposit." "This isn't about money," I explained. "It's about being seen, valued, celebrated. Hannah got those things freely. I had to beg for scraps of attention." As I spoke, something shifted in my mother's expression. Defensive denial, giving way to dawning comprehension. She suddenly looked older, smaller, more human than the perfect maternal figure she'd always tried to project. Why, I asked the question I'd carried my entire life. Why was Hannah always the favorite? What was wrong with me? My mother's hands trembled as she set her tissue aside. "Nothing was wrong with you," she whispered. "It was me. It was always me." My father reached for her hand, but she pulled away, sitting straighter. I grew up with a mother who constantly compared me to my cousins, she began. Nothing I did was ever good enough. I was the smart one, not the pretty one. I got scholarships, not dates. My academic achievements were expected, never celebrated. She paused, gathering herself. When Hannah was born, she was so much like me. Focused, determined, academically, gifted. I saw myself in her, and I swore she would never feel the way my mother made me feel. I would celebrate every achievement, validate every success. And me, I prompted. You were like your father, she said, glancing at him. Creative, social, well-rounded. The things that came naturally to you were things I'd always struggled with, always been criticized for lacking. My father's expression registered surprise, as if hearing this for the first time. So you punish me for it, I asked. No, she exclaimed. At least, I didn't think I was. I thought I was pushing you to develop the skills that had been valued in my family. Academic excellence, measurable achievements. While taking Hannah's similar successes for granted, my father interjected quietly. My mother nodded the realization, seeming to pain her physically. I became my mother, she whispered, the very thing I swore I'd never be. The revelation hung in the air between us. It explained much, but excused nothing. Understanding the source of her behavior didn't erase decades of hurt. I'm not looking for justifications, I said finally. I'm looking for acknowledgement, for change. What can we do? My father asked Ernest, for perhaps the first time in our relationship. How do we fix this? I don't know if you can fix 31 years in one conversation, I replied honestly, but acknowledging the problem is a start. Not dismissing my feelings would help. And maybe. I hesitated, considering Melissa's suggestion. Maybe family therapy. My mother looked startled. Therapy? Yes, I said firmly. With a professional who can help us establish healthier patterns. Because I'm not coming back to more family dinners just to have the same dynamics play out again. We'll do it, my father said immediately. Whatever it takes. My mother nodded slowly, her initial resistance fading. Yes, she agreed. I want to understand. I want to do better. I studied them both, my father's desperation, my mother's fragile humility. Neither reaction was familiar. Neither fit the parents I'd known all my life. But perhaps that was the point. The old patterns were breaking, painful, as the process might be. I'm not offering forgiveness today, I said clearly. That will take time. Trust will take time. We understand, my father replied. But I'm willing to try, I continued. For my sake as much as yours. Because carrying this hurt hasn't served me either. My mother wiped fresh tears. Thank you for giving us a chance. For giving me a chance. I don't deserve it. This isn't about what any of us deserve, I said, rising to indicate the conversation was concluding. It's about what might be possible if we all commit to change. I left shortly after declining their invitation to stay for dinner. Small steps were important. Boundaries even more so. Walking to the coffee shop where Melissa waited, I felt both emotionally drained and strangely energized. For the first time in my life, I had spoken my complete truth to my parents. I had named the dysfunction without minimizing or apologizing. Whether anything changed long-term remained to be seen, but I had changed already, and that I was learning made all the difference. 6 months passed each day, bringing small shifts in my family's long-established patterns. Change came neither easily nor linearly, but it came nonetheless. Dr. Abrams, our family therapist, had a gentle but unflinching approach to unpacking decades of dysfunction. In her comfortable office, with its neutral tones and carefully arranged seating, we gathered twice monthly to navigate the terrain of our shared history. Healing happens in layers, she reminded us during a particularly difficult session when my mother reverted to old defenses. Old habits reassert themselves under stress. The key is recognizing the pattern before it fully takes hold. Those first few sessions revealed just how deeply rooted my mother's own wounds were. She spoke haltingly of her childhood, in a home where her mother constantly compared her to more socially adept cousins. Academic excellence was expected rather than praised, while her awkwardness at social gatherings became the subject of family jokes. I swore my children would never feel that way, she admitted during our third session, tissues clutched in her hand. But instead of breaking the pattern, I just reversed it. I overvalued in Hannah what had been undervalued in me, and I pushed Lou toward what I'd been criticized for lacking. Understanding the origin of her behavior didn't excuse it, but it helped me view her through a more compassionate lens. She wasn't a villain in my story. She was a wounded person who had unconsciously wounded others. My father's role proved equally complex. In therapy, he admitted to noticing the favoritism early in our childhood, but feeling ill-equipped to address it. I told myself I was balancing things by spending time with Lou when Diane was focused on Hannah, he explained. But those moments were sporadic, without the consistent celebration Diane showed Hannah. I failed both my children by not speaking up. Hannah joined several sessions, initially reluctant, but ultimately invested in healing our family. Her perspective as the favored child provided crucial insights. I always felt this pressure to be perfect, she confessed during a joint session. Like Mom's happiness depended on my achievements. It wasn't as obvious as what Lou experienced, but it was its own kind of burden. Our relationships with each other transformed as well. Hannah and I developed a closer bond, no longer separated by our parents' comparative treatment. We began a tradition of monthly sibling dinners without our parents creating space to know each other as adults rather than as competing children. During one such dinner, at a small Italian restaurant near my apartment, Hannah raised her wine glass in a toast. To my brother, who had the courage to break the cycle. We both did. I countered, clinking my glass against hers. You could have denied everything when confronted. You chose truth instead. She smiled, the expression holding equal parts sadness and hope. Better late than never. Right. My relationship with Melissa deepened through these months of family reconstruction. Her steady support never wavered, but she refused to let me use family therapy as a reason to avoid our future. Your parents are working on their issues, she said one evening, as we walked along the Charles River, autumn leaves crunching beneath our feet. What about ours? Do we have issues? I asked, only half joking. She bumped her shoulder against mine. Everyone has issues, Lou, but I'm talking about our future. Are we moving forward, or are we stuck until your family situation resolves? Her question prompted a late-night conversation about what we both wanted: marriage, eventually children, a home with more space than our current apartment. The next weekend, I asked her to marry me during a picnic in the Boston Public Garden. No elaborate production, just an honest question from a man who finally believed he deserved happiness. Absolutely yes, she answered, laughing through happy tears, as I slid the simple solitaire ring on her finger. It's about time. When I called my parents with the news, their reaction marked how far we'd come. My mother didn't immediately compare our engagement to Hannah's or question our timing. Instead, her voice filled with genuine warmth. Lou, that's wonderful news. Melissa is such a special person. Have you set a date? Would you like to come for dinner? To celebrate? My father's gruff voice added, We're so happy for you both, son. Truly. Their response wasn't perfect. My mother still asked more questions than necessary and suggested venues before I could finish my sentence. But the difference was palpable. They were trying. Even more telling was their reaction when we announced we'd found a small condo in Cambridge we wanted to buy. Before I could even finish explaining our financial plan, my father interrupted. We'd like to help with the down payment, he said. The same amount we gave Hannah and Greg. It's only fair. The acknowledgement of past inequity spoken so plainly nearly left me speechless. Thank you, I managed finally. That's incredibly generous. It's not generosity, my mother corrected quietly. It's equity. Something we should have offered long ago. Not every interaction showed such progress. There were still dinners where my mother slipped into old habits, asking more questions about Hannah's cases than my projects. The difference now was that she caught herself, or my father gently redirected her, or I calmly pointed out the pattern. The dynamic was acknowledged rather than ignored, addressed rather than accepted. Dr. Abrams called this conscious family making, the deliberate construction of new patterns to replace dysfunctional ones. You're not just healing past wounds, she explained. You're creating the foundation for healthier relationships moving forward. This work will serve you when you have children of your own. The thought of parenting after my complicated childhood once terrified me. Now with therapy and Melissa's steadying presence, I began to see it as an opportunity rather than a burden, a chance to break cycles rather than perpetuate them. Today marks exactly 6 months since that fateful family dinner when my mother's careless words finally shattered our collective pretense. We're gathered around the same dining room table, but the atmosphere couldn't be more different. My mother has prepared lasagna rather than roast beef, a deliberate change to mark our new beginning. Hannah and Greg sit across from Melissa and me, conversation flowing naturally between topics. My father asks detailed questions about my recent promotion to marketing director, showing genuine interest in my career path. My mother mentions Hannah's accomplishments, without comparative comments about my own work. Small changes perhaps invisible to outsiders, but monumental to those of us living within this transformed family system. After dinner, as Melissa helps my mother serve coffee, and dessert, Hannah pulls me aside in the hallway. "Look at this," she whispers, nodding toward the living room wall. Where once hung a gallery of primarily Hannah's achievements, now stands a balanced collection of family photographs. My college graduation alongside Hannah's law school ceremony, my Little League team next to her orchestra group, recent professional headshots of both of us displayed with equal prominence. "Mom did this last weekend," Hannah explains. "Didn't say a word about it, just waited to see if anyone would notice." The visual representation of our family's effort toward balance brings unexpected emotion to my throat. It's a start I manage. "A good one," Hannah agrees, squeezing my arm before we rejoin the others. Later, as we prepare to leave, my mother hugs me with uncharacteristic vulnerability. "I'm proud of you, Lou," she says quietly. "Not just for your promotion or your engagement, for your strength, your compassion, for giving us another chance when you had every reason not to." The words I've waited a lifetime to hear delivered simply in the front hallway of my childhood home. They don't erase the past, but they help illuminate the path forward. Driving home with Melissa beside me, I reflect on the journey of these past 6 months. It's strange, I tell her, navigating through the familiar streets of Newton toward Cambridge. I spent so many years wanting a dramatic moment of recognition, some grand gesture where my parents finally saw me clearly and admitted all their mistakes. And instead, she prompts. Instead, it's been hundreds of small moments. Therapy sessions and difficult conversations. Text messages and rearranged photographs. It's less cinematic, but somehow more meaningful. Melissa smiles, her hand finding mine across the center console. That's how real change works. Not in dramatic confrontations, but in consistent, intentional choices made, day after day. I nod, understanding the wisdom in her words. My quiet departure that night, 6 months ago, accomplished what years of seeking validation never could. Not because it was particularly strategic or powerful in itself, but because it represented a fundamental shift in how I valued myself. I stopped waiting for external confirmation of my worth, and simply claimed it as my birthright. As we approach our apartment building, I think about all the viewers who might relate to my story. The overlooked siblings, the family peacemakers, the quiet ones who swallow hurt rather than rock the boat. What would you say to someone going through something similar? Melissa asks, reading my thoughts, as she often does. Someone watching your story and seeing themselves in it. I consider her question carefully. I'd tell them that their feelings are valid, that having to constantly prove your worth to the people who should love you unconditionally is exhausting and wrong. That setting boundaries isn't selfish. It's necessary. And about healing, she prompts as we park. That it's possible, but not simple. That understanding doesn't automatically create forgiveness. That some relationships can be repaired, while others might need to be limited or even ended. And most importantly, that your value exists independently of anyone's ability to recognize it. 6 months ago, I couldn't have articulated these truths so clearly. I was still trapped in patterns established in childhood, still seeking validation from sources unlikely to provide it. My quiet exit from that painful dinner wasn't a grand gesture of defiance, but a simple act of self-respect. Yet sometimes, the quietest actions echo the loudest. If my story resonates with you, if you've ever felt invisible in your own family or measured against impossible standards, know that change is possible. It begins not with dramatic confrontations, but with the quiet assertion of your inherent worth. Have you experienced similar family dynamics? Share your story in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that they're not alone. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most powerful statement is the one you make by valuing yourself when others don't.